I want to be able to share with you a biblical answer to why. Why would we do this? So I believe that if you're going to win the world for Christ, because you know anyone who doesn't believe in Jesus, when they die, they go to hell. If you want to win the world for Christ, you got to win the city. And if you want to win the city, you got to win the inner city. And at the heart of the city stands Christ and His love. And His heart has got to be our heart. We've got to feel about these things the way He feels about these things. And Jesus says in His Word that He has a heart for His Jewish people. Let's see, let me get there. In Matthew 23, 37 and 38. Somebody have that? Somebody have a Bible? Can you get to a Bible? Matthew chapter 23.
I'll give them one.
Okay. Matthew chapter 23, 37 and 38.
Do you have other verses?
I have three of them. Matthew chapter 23. Matthew chapter 23, verses 37 and 38. The next one is Romans. Romans chapter 1. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Romans. Romans chapter 1, verses 16 and 17. Matthew 23. There you go. Matthew 23, verses 37 and 38. You want to read that for us?
Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those sent to you, how often I have longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing. Look, your house is left to you desolate.
Empty, dusty, barren, old. So He's crying out. This is Jesus talking in that text, and He's crying out for Jerusalem. He's crying out for the Jewish people. But the Old Testament covenant people, the Jews, were born on a promise that a Messiah would come to save them from their sins. Jesus came as the Messiah, and they said, "No, it ain't you." And they rejected Him. Some believed. Some still are coming from unbelief to faith today. But His heart goes out to them, crying out to them because they rejected Him. And so the heart of Jesus for Jewish people is that He loves them. His heart for all people, regardless of who we are and how we think and where we are, is that He loves us. And He wants us to be in love with Him and to be in this loving relationship with Him. So Romans 1, 16 and 17.
For I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who lives, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. For in the righteousness of God is revealed from faith for faith, as it is written, the righteous shall live by faith.
All right, very good. So, he says, Paul says in that text, I am not ashamed of the gospel, because the good news that Jesus has lived and died and risen again, it is the power of God unto salvation for everyone who believes in Him. Everyone who believes in Him. Then he says this in that text. You look at the words as I say this. Tell me if I'm saying it right. First for the Jew, then for the Gentile. First for the Jew. His heart is still that Jewish people would come from unbelief to faith and receive Him as the Messiah, that they too would know the gift of the freedom and the forgiveness that we know as faithful followers of Jesus. Still has a heart for the Jews. And if Jesus has a heart for the Jews, so must His church. But it's complicated. It's a complicated place. It's a complicated set of stuff. And the idea that American Lutheran pastor is going to come over and do anything good in the midst of that environment, for me to say that I have that in me is the height of arrogance. So I need to come in humility and learn and come alongside those who are doing great work. And that's what we're doing when we go to Jerusalem. So the first thing you got to do is understand God's heart toward those people who are around the world, but at the heart of it is the country of Israel and the city of Jerusalem. So I wanted to share that with you before we dive in. So that's why we went, because we're partnering with these people to help what God is doing in their lives, and we'll say more about that later. So the trip then, we got to, we rented cars in Tel Aviv and got to drive in Israel. That was pretty cool.
That was not cool.
And in Israel, we drive on the same side of the road that we do here, and we drive, and the steering wheel is on the same side of the car as it is here. So I was actually kind of disappointed in that. I thought, wouldn't it be cool to experience that other either a wreck, and we've been in a wreck, but that's okay.
Let me just say though, when you drive there, there's like they say there's a speed limit, but there's no enforcement of it. So when you're on the interstate, it's insane. People drive crazy.
So, and they have lanes just like we do on the major highways, but then there are motorcycles, right, who just fly in and out of traffic, right? On the outside curve of the road, in between the cars, in the middle, they're just flying by you all the time, and people are just flipping back and forth between lanes and going nuts.
And all of the cars have dents.
And all the cars have dents. So when we got to Tiberias, the very first night, when we got to Tiberias, we got to go back to a place. So Paul and I were there 4 years ago because this ongoing relationship with the Kaspari Center that we'll talk to you about more. So it was like coming home again. 4 years ago when we got to this place, you really can't see this, but this is all outside dining. The Sea of Galilee is right over this railing right here. And so you're sitting on the Sea of Galilee on a deck, eating and drinking your supper, and it is really cool. 4 years ago when we were there, we were eating and drinking, and on the other side of the Sea of Galilee, up the side of the mountain, is something called the Golan Heights. The Golan Heights. And while we were sitting there eating, there were bombs that dropped in the Golan Heights over there on the other side of the Sea of Galilee. And you can see across the Sea of Galilee. It's not like Lake Michigan where you can go down to the water and you can't see the other side. Right? So it's much smaller. It's much smaller than that. All the way around the circumference of the Sea of Galilee is a 94-mile trip. It's much longer, though, than it is wide. So you can see from side to side when you get there. And so we could see the bombs dropping up over here on the other side. That was 4 years ago. We didn't have that experience again. But I thought you'd enjoy that. So we get back, we eat at this place. You don't need to know that. So one thing before you go. This is the English pronunciation of these Hebrew words, right? Hebrew, so English goes left to right. Hebrew goes right to left in the way that you read it. Okay? So, next one. The very first place that we then go is the place where Jesus preached the Sermon on the Mount. Matthew chapter 5, verses 5 through 7 is Jesus talking, and the place where he's talking is now got a church built up over the site. The Catholic Church does this a lot. They will take a sacred site, and then in order to protect and control it, they'll build a sanctuary up and take control, and there are Catholic nuns and other people who are maintaining the place. But this sanctuary then is the place upon which, when Jesus gathered all the disciples together and he preached the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5 through 7, Beatitudes. It's called the Mount of Beatitudes, right? Matthew chapter 5. He did it right here, right where this church is. Go ahead. So then, can you go ahead?
Sure.
One more. And then where's Peter's house? So then we went to Peter's house. And so just go back to the first one that was there. So these are the holes. So this is an archaeological site. In other words, people found stuff here and they began to dig it all up. And when something is found in the dirt, no matter who owns it, the government takes over and it becomes a government site because it's a religious archaeological site now. And so if you own land, but when you're digging in your crop and you see some kind of holy relic, that land's no longer yours. The government takes it over, and there are people who come in to find out what else is there. And you lose your land. And that's what happens on this site. And what they dug up were all of these walls to all of these homes. So let me just give you the picture. Here is a community of homes. There are like 8 homes all connected by a courtyard in this place. It's like condo living. And here, you come back this way, right up here is where the synagogue, that next picture, this is the wall of the synagogue. Who's that Jew? I never saw that before. Some creeper. This is the wall of the synagogue, and then right back over here is Peter's house, 50 yards from the Sea of Galilee. So right down at the waterfront, Sea of Galilee is where Peter, what did he do for a living? What did Peter?
Fish.
He was a fisherman. He had a fishing business, right? So right up from the beach, where all the boats were docked, is his house. And then right in the center of the community was the synagogue. See, there used to be a time when the synagogue was the center of everything that was happening in the town. All of the social stuff, all of the celebration stuff, all of the get-together stuff, all of the community stuff was at the synagogue. So then out on the other side of it is where all those houses were. And this is the city of Capernaum. When Jesus was there, when Jesus was all around, all the things that happened around the Sea of Galilee, he made Peter's house his base of operation. He lived there with Peter. Peter's mother was in the house, and his family, and Jesus stayed there as well. So we have this opportunity to be walking in the place where Jesus was. And you can travel all the way around the Sea of Galilee. Then we'd take day trips around the Sea of Galilee, and we would go from place to place, and we would see what we would see. So this is the synagogue in Capernaum. Down here, see there are different kinds of rocks? Right down here, these are obviously much older. And then this was built up later because it was destroyed, and then they built up over the top of it. That's what happens in all these places. You want to go on? You want to tell them something?
Okay, so this was, it's actually a statue. It's kind of hard to see, I apologize. We could turn the lights off, but I don't know how that can picture. So this is a statue, and it's interesting. And you know, it was there last time, but we never noticed it, and people walked by it, and nobody really paid attention. And then I don't remember who from our group, there were 8 of us in our group, somebody stopped and like was really looking at it, and so we all kind of stopped, and it's like, what is this? And what is Jesus represented. So when you look really closely, you can see, so it's a person who's wrapped up in a blanket, laying on a bench, which makes you think what? What do you think about? They're homeless, right? So when you look really closely, the only thing that you can see are, there are nail marks in his feet. So that person is representing Jesus, right? So just thinking about that Jesus has a heart for homeless people. There's a little bowl there that people could throw money in to give.
This right here was full of money.
As to acknowledge that Jesus has a heart for those people too, and that how many times do we just walk by people that are in need and don't even take a look at them? That just really struck me that time.
In Matthew 25, Jesus says, whatever you have done unto the least of these, you have done unto me. And so what he's trying to say is, when you help a homeless person, you're helping me. And so, next one. So then, all around the Sea of Galilee, we take these day trips, and one of the places we went to a place called Magdala. You ever heard of that? Magdala.
Sure you have.
Mary of Magdala. Mary Magdala was one of the women, right, who was with Jesus, traveled with Jesus, right? So Mary Magdala, this is the town she was at, and it's the church who's there. There's the Sea of Galilee behind the glass, and they made in the sanctuary there, they made their altar in the shape of a boat. Then in the next picture, do you have the one with you?
I do.
Go to it. I just wanted you to see the scale of this. So down in the basement of that sanctuary, there is this mural that is painted there. If you get into religious art, this is one of the famous paintings in all of the world. You'll see this hand here. That is a woman's hand reaching out and touching the garment that Jesus is wearing. Jesus then says, "Who touched me? I felt power go out from me. Who touched me?" And they're in this whole great big crowd of people, and so the disciples are saying, "What do you mean, who touched you? You're walking around among all these people." And it's this woman who's in a desperate situation who reaches out to touch Jesus because she believes that if she could just touch the hem of his garment, she would be healed, and she would be free.
And you notice too that all the feet there are men's feet, so that's an unusual situation where the woman would be bold enough and brave enough to reach into that.
So again, this is one of the places along the Sea of Galilee.
That's looking out to that's Tiberias there, right?
Is it?
Yeah.
So across from the sea, this is where the town right over here is where we stayed while we were there, and then we would launch off from there. So this is a tell, an archaeological site. The town is called Bet-Shan. Bet-Shan. In one of the famous Old Testament battles, in order to show the enemy that you better not do that again, they cut the heads of the people that they defeated, hung them on poles outside the city in Bet-Shan, facing over into the Jordan Valley, so that all of the Israelites, when they look up and think about attacking that city, they'll think twice, because there is my king, there is the prophet, there is the head of the army. Their heads are there on poles outside the city wall. That happened at Bet-Shan, 1 Samuel chapter 5, I think it is. And so all of this down here has been dug out and uncovered. Over here, there's a whole coliseum, an open-air amphitheater that would seat 5,000 people. Right over here to the right, and then down in here is all of the city. And then up over here, on the other side of the wall, was a fortress, and that's where the heads that hung the heads. So that down on the Jordan Valley, out on the other side, everybody would see and know, you better not bring that stuff in here. Right? So, but this is a group of, how many were there?
15.
Probably 15 people. So all these archaeological sites have to be dug out, discovered, and people are in there with like toothbrushes, and they're going along the edge of something that's been found, and they're uncovering it, but they're doing it with great care. And people volunteer from around the world to come and do this under the instruction and the control of the person, the archaeologist, who's got control over the site. And that's a team of people actively working on the site in that place. So in the city, in Bet Shan, it's a major metropolitan city.
Are you going to tell them what it is? You're going to let me guess. Sorry.
What is it?
A bench.
A bench? Kind of.
Okay, go ahead.
It's a latrine. You know what the word latrine means? It's a bathroom. So let me be indelicate for a second. You put one cheek on one rock and one cheek on the other rock, sitting right next to your buddy. And then underneath here, why am I doing this? Underneath here, there was a stream of water that would come down and take what you got rid of out of the city.
And that's just like out in the open?
Out in the open.
Like on the side of the road, that's just right there.
Yeah. Now, see, this is it is a Roman city, right? It is a Roman city, and that was the public restroom. There was no men's restroom versus women's restroom
Should we go on?
either. And these are two of the guys that we were there with. That's Bob and Jerry.
We'll move on.
Yeah, let's keep going.
That's still part of that same area.
Yeah,
So go ahead.
you do it.
So this is in the nicer places, temples, palaces, nicer homes. These are all tiny little tiles. They're tile floors. So instead of carpet or linoleum like we have, they would cover in very intricate designs their floors with tile. And so that's placed into the concrete or cement, whatever was there. And so this one, lots of them you could walk on. They don't preserve, they've been there for thousands of years, so they're not going anywhere, so you're able to walk on them, and the colors were still brilliant. But just the intricate design of that is really cool to see.
So this is a boat that was uncovered in the Sea of Galilee and drugged up out of the water and preserved from the time when Jesus was alive. It's called the Jesus boat, but it's in a place called the the Galilee Museum for the Jesus boat. Right? Go ahead.
But it was recently discovered, like in 1990s or so.
Okay. Again, picture of the Sea of Galilee. Go ahead.
See how you can see the other side.
So this is the outside wall of a church. This says Bet Elihu. Bet Elihu. Bet means house. House of Elijah. Bet Elihu. So we traveled from the Sea of Galilee to Haifa, which used to be called Mount Carmel. Mount Carmel was the place where when Elijah defeated the 450 prophets of Baal, it happened on Mount Carmel. It happened in this place. And so we got to go see two things. Number one, you got to see where he defeated the 450 prophets of Baal, where that happened. At the end of Elijah's life, the Bible says that he was taken up in a whirlwind and didn't die. He was taken directly to heaven, didn't have to go through death. And that happened at Mount Carmel as well. So the church here is called Bet Elihu. And the church is a Messianic Jewish congregation. So when someone who is Jewish does believe in Jesus as the Messiah, they call themselves Messianic Jews because they have believed in Messiah. Jewish believers in Jesus. And there are 600 of these congregations all around the world. And every single one of those congregations, when they get their Sunday school teacher training or their pastor training or curriculum for Sunday school or any of the things they do in their curriculum or their life, they would look to Jerusalem for all those things. And the Kaspari Center that we support provides all of that curriculum for them. And a large majority of the people who are writing curriculum for them are Lutheran. And so we pour in to help all these congregations all around the world. And the 150 congregations, like this one, so inside the walls, worship took place. There were probably 200 people in worship that day. They had 4 different languages up on the screens as they played their music. Lots of kids, lots of joy, lots of singing, lots of dancing. It was a wonderful, wonderful moment.
I would call it contemporary Christian music. I mean, it was, they had like a praise band like we have in our contemporary worship service, so very similar, just different language.
So then from Haifa, we went to a place called Caesarea Maritima. It's on the Mediterranean Sea, and it was Herod's summer home. So his palace is down at one end. At the other end is the fortress, and in between is something called a hippodrome. Anybody have any idea what that is? A hippodrome. Chariot races. And so it's a quarter-mile track, oval, and they race chariots along. They had Colosseum walls and bleachers and stuff up the side because people would come watch the chariot races. And so that was Caesarea Maritima. And here's a picture from the walkway, Mediterranean Sea, the fortress. This is from where the palace was down at the other end of the property.
There's 16 more pictures.
Oh, Lord.
And 7
Go ahead. Oh, you didn't get the motorcycle?
That's the good news.
Oh, okay. Now we move on to Jerusalem. You are in the old city of Jerusalem. Outside the walls is a whole metropolitan city of Jerusalem. But inside the walls, this is what it looks like. It looks like it did then. You've got market, you've got people selling, you've got people buying. The streets are crowded. When Jesus was taken through the streets of the city on the Via del Rosso, that we'll show you in a moment, this is what it looked like. This is what it looked like. And then at that time, the cross, just like the heads on the poles outside of Bethshan, the cross was in the ground outside of the city in order to say to everybody who would come into the city, you don't do that here, right? And so the Via Dolorosa, the shops. This is a little old lady. My knee was hurting, and so I took a picture of this little old lady so that I would.
I don't know if you can really tell from that picture that she's like really stooped over.
Yeah, she's very bent over, dragging a box so she can sell her stuff. It made me feel like, come on, Will, stop whining about your knee. So it could be worse. She wasn't complaining at all. So go ahead. So this is the Via Dolorosa. Along the way through the streets of the city, they will have these places where different things took place. This is step number 8 along the way. There are 14 places where they believe that different stuff took place along the way. And we just wanted to show you that on the Via Dolorosa, this is what these moments look like.
So as Jesus was going, carrying the cross, to what would be his crucifixion, there's that path they have marked out that you can follow along.
So inside something, at the end of that journey, the Via Dolorosa, there's this church, again, built up over the site where Jesus was crucified, called the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, there is this altar here, and then here, this is glass right here. You can get down and bow down in here or out on each side of it. And you look down through the glass and you see the site, the exact site where the cross was. And so let me just say to you, it has been archaeologically proven that this is the site. There's a lot of argument about whether or not it was 10 feet this way or 10 feet this way. But it was in the room. It was under that glass. It was right there where Jesus was crucified. Go ahead. Then, outside in a line going down toward the tomb is the stone pavement where they laid Jesus to embalm the body after he died. This is a line of people going way out over here to get inside Joseph of Arimathea's tomb where Jesus was laid for those 3 days before he rose again from the dead. So they're getting in line to go pray and see this site.
And then we move on.
So then out of there comes this is the Mount of Olives. So out over the wall of the city, you go down something called the Kidron Valley and you come back up the other side and it's the Mount of Olives, where Jesus, he was arrested, he cut off Malchus's ear, Peter cut off Malchus's ear with a sword, and Jesus stuck it back on again, and prayed with his disciples and they fell asleep. They couldn't stay awake, and so all of those things took place in the Mount of Olives, and then they would come up into the city from the Mount of Olives. And that is an olive tree that is old enough to where they think that it was probably alive when Jesus was there. It's that old. These things were huge. I should have put Paula next to it. So from the Mount of Olives, you look down through the Kidron Valley and see up. This is something called the Dome of the Rock. The church that was built over the place that they believe that all of creation began. And when Jesus comes again, they believe he'll come back to this spot as the place where he comes. I don't know if that's true, but that's what the belief and the tradition is.
And then all of these are all, like, you can't really tell, but all of these stones are all graves. This is just filled with grave sites. Because they want to face.
So Scripture says on the day that he was crucified, that when he died, darkness came over the land, earthquake, and the tombs of many holy people were opened up, busted up, and there were dead people seen walking around the city. From there. Let's go. So, underneath the city, there are these tunnels. Underneath the city, there are these tunnels where the women would go through the tunnel down to the Gihon River, get water, and bring it back up into the city. And when the Roman army attacked Jerusalem and destroyed it, many of the priests and many of the people escaped down through these tunnels in order to get out of the city and survive. And so we got to tour the tunnels and walk through the tunnels that are there. It's so cool.
Okay, we gotta go.
Huh?
We gotta.
Okay. This is when Peter preached a sermon and 3,000 came to their number on Pentecost Day. That's where it happened. And that's where they were baptized. And there's Paula with two ladies there's this motorcycle. Is this weird or what? So, one tire in the back, two in the front, that close together. You guys ever seen a spider? Right? You know what I'm talking about, a spider? These things, these two tires, they're only like 16 inches apart. Any of you ever rode a motorcycle? So you wonder, so you get to a corner, how's that feel? Are you leaning into it? Or you got it? So the shocks were huge out here. It's a Yamaha. I'd never seen anything like that before, so I took a picture just for you guys. This is the Kaspari Center. So these people who are doing all this work for the sake of these Jewish biblical believers in Jesus and providing them are the people that we support while they're there. Thanks.
You guys were awesome. Thank you.